Hi. Well, it's a delight to be here 20 years after this course was founded. I'm very honored to be asked to speak. I hope to try and make some sense. And if I don't, I'm sure you'll tell me. The question, I'm going to have to keep doing this, by the way, because my notes are down there, computer's over there. The question over the lifetime of the IDBE, has our industry become increasingly interdisciplinary or just increasingly diverse, is fascinatingly mischievous as a question, I thought. It has a category error within it, which is conflating diversity and interdisciplinarity in the same way. But I was really interested in the way they actually, the juxtaposition of the two does throw some light on quite a few things. It's more I thought about it, so congratulations on the question. And that category error stems, or deliberate one, stems maybe from the fact that one project appears to have stalled interdisciplinary collaboration, or hasn't progressed as fast as we would have hoped 20 years ago, and the other one does seem to be making some headway. And in 1994 we'd have said, well, we need more of both. Why? Because they're both good things. And I'm not sure we were absolutely clear why they were such good things. If there is one thing that characterizes, I'm going to have to maybe do this rather silly thing, hold it in my hand. It's kind of like a shrine, that kind of. So if I can actually characterize maybe where I'm going with this, is to try to be very clear, focus on the question in the next 10, 20 years on, what is it good for? And more importantly, perhaps, who is it good for? And I hope by the end of this short presentation to show that actually in asking that question we'll be in tune with a lot of very interesting thinking that is going on here in Cambridge, at the Cambridge Programme for Sustainability Leadership, for example, in the UK GBC and elsewhere. But I want to start with dealing with diversity first, and the slide that many of you will recognize there is Gregory Peck in the Fountainhead, which is almost, if you like, the antithesis of everything the IDBE stands for, but nevertheless represents a very compelling story and a very compelling narrative that has seduced many of us, and not only architects, over the years. So just deal with diversity, though, because I think it does throw some light on things. An equally enjoyable slide here. We can demonstrate, obviously, very clearly here that this is architecture, this is the representation of women. The pale grey line, the one that's truly continuous, is number of women entering education, which is now at about 45%, uncannily similar to the yes vote. But nevertheless, I'm not sure we can draw any conclusions from that at all. You can see that there is some progress there, because actually the numbers qualifying is nothing like the same as the numbers entering, and there's quite a lot of drop-off. These questions have been analysed quite carefully and addressed and tackled. There are many practices now in which the representation of women is half and half, mine included. And I would say that within those 20 years, we have gone from 1 in 10 to 50%. And so have other practices. That is, whatever one might say about how far there is to go, let's not be churlish. That is progress. This is an interesting table because it neatly avoids the issue of the awkward description, black and minority, ethnic minority, black and, etc. It just actually measures the number of white people in a kind of clever lateral move. So are the number of white people, their representation becoming less disproportionate? And of course the answer is again yes. I don't need to go into detail. I think I see you studying the table keenly from where you are. But obviously in 1988, 1999, the 91% passing Part 3 to actually now it's more like, it says we only go up here to 2007, but it is certainly a larger number of minority ethnic and black students who are getting getting through. And within that, according to studies in which I was quite closely involved in CABE, there are some interesting variations, such as Asian, Chinese, and Indian students are well overrepresented compared to numbers in the population and respective to white people. And there is diversity within this diversity is one of the key points here, and one needs to understand that. Engineering, black and minority ethnic people make up those numbers that are on the screen there. Interestingly, it still amounts to only half as many in the construction industry as in the population. And even though there are, I haven't got that number here. I think that actually in manual labor, it's actually not much more. You would have thought that it might almost make up for it, but it doesn't. 8% of people in the working population, actually less than half within the construction industry. And then there's some variations within the numbers, but actually interestingly, only 1.5% of managers in construction. And actually that kind of shows you where the barriers really are. And the same study for women, 11% of construction professionals, 9% of engineers. Actually, it's interesting, there are readily available statistics for other countries that shows that UK is not doing too well. Only 2% of manual workers in construction, 47%, of course, as we know, of the working population. So these numbers are, however, improving. They're going up. So we know that something is happening. So what do we conclude from that? And I'll leave you with a slightly enigmatic picture next on the wall. And what... sorry, do something about it. Yeah, that's better. The two things it shows. One is that things are changing, but other that we can actually measure what's changed. It's actually quite easy to measure and understand how diversity is changing. The same can't be said for the degree to which the interdisciplinary potential power of the team is being harnessed, and to what end. We can't actually do it in that very clear way. And in a way, maybe we're a bit lazy that we don't do it. These things are easy to measure, and of course, as we know, things which are easy to measure get measured and actually can be acted upon and so on. One of the problems is that we have presumably not really succeeded in showing why interdisciplinary work really adds value. It's difficult to show. And then the question I asked myself was, we are in a market economy. You have to at some point say, if it's not being widely adopted, there must be a reason. There's no profit in it. No, it's not actually in anybody's direct interest. There isn't a business case to be made. Well, of course, we all know intuitively that can't be true. But so why isn't it actually more widespread? And this question has been exercising many of us for many very, very long time. The recent inquiry by the EDGE group into professions tackled it. When I was IDBE president in my inaugural, I tackled it in the following way. I said, there's the House of Parliament. And way back in the mid-19th century, early 19th century, when the professions were formed, they distinguished themselves in their distance from the dirt of commerce and the dirt of labor by positioning themselves in a certain way in respect to the seat of power. There's the RICS, its headquarters, and it's not an accident that dignitaries are photographed with Westminster behind. There's the Institution of Civil Engineers, the ICE. The mechanicals are just next door. By the time the architects came around, it was a bit too late. Property prices were too high. That was 100 years after they were formed, but they had a very nice HQ. Now, all of this is a description of the professions as centers of power and influence, and also as tribes, which is not necessarily congruent with their nature as holders and promoters of valuable knowledge. They coincide on the whole, but it's not the same driver. And I thought that we might conceptualize a change to interdisciplinarity by saying that, look, the RIBA has all these different sort of interest groups, and these are sort of at random. They're not necessarily exactly the ones. These are knowledge communities, one might say, that people are interested in. The Landscape Institute has some, and some of these coincide. SIBC has some, and IC and RICS all have some. So we can actually draw a map where there are communities of interest and professional institutions, and we could inverse the map and say, actually, knowledge, if knowledge rather than tribal is the defining characteristic of an institution, then we might gather around the knowledge, and therefore it'll be interdisciplinary naturally. And also this was a think piece to try to say, well, how can we sidestep the question of how all the institutions must get together at an institutional level? We might erase our differences. And I thought that actually the tribal aspect is pretty useful. It's a story that binds people, and stories are important. But can we actually tell a parallel story which in time might become more important? But actually, as it happens, the knowledge communities that were set up at the RIBA are not necessarily performing at their best. They're not necessarily as interdisciplinary as they might be. And many of us then started thinking, actually, sustainability is going to be an extraordinary driver for interdisciplinarity. And I think, obviously, it's been a very big theme on this course. So, for example, the traditional work plan, and this slide was made well before the new RIBA work plan. We should make this one completely baffling, by the way, but there's the traditional work plan, and if you look at the front end of it, if sustainability requires that that you cannot actually just sequentially think up elements of design late in the process, that you've got to include a complete analysis of building physics, of construction techniques and weight right at the front, and then implement it, then it would require the team to be right at front. Not only that, but the contractor's input, but not necessarily contractor, but certainly not necessarily contractor as middle manager, but contractor as constructor at the front. And then the question also is, what is a project? And there are non-construction solutions and a post-project period. And we were all very excited by the idea that we might derive true value. Richard Saxon's work on value actually is very much about seeing the process all the way through to the use of a building rather than the completion of the building. And then we thought that BIM was the driver. BIM would be the answer. Now everybody would be around BIM. And so we've kind of held on to these drivers, and I don't think that's what's going to work, because all of these, they're all tools, they're all contexts, and they don't necessarily drive that which we believe in and is at the core of this course. And so we have to ask, what is it that will drive it? And I'm minded of the fact that this is the interdisciplinary studies in the built environment, not the multidisciplinary studies in the built environment. It is interdisciplinary, and I think that on the diagram on the left, it's about, both diagrams are about multidisciplinary work. We can talk about what goes in the circles. I'm deliberately leaving them empty. But collaboration, true collaboration, is interdisciplinary. It minds the space in between our disciplines, but also in the overlaps in the disciplines. And I think that it's a fundamentally different thing from the idea of condensing of the various bits of knowledge and having a process synthesis or a process synthesizer at the center of it, draws this in and then puts it out. Now, 1994 was when the Latham report came out, and it was called Constructing the Team. I think that title is telling. Immediately we all thought, this is about collaboration. And of course there were changes to the law which kind of made some of the more difficult practices slightly less attractive, such as withholding payment and all that. And then there was the Egan report, Rethinking Construction. Partnering, all those things were were very enthusiastically talked about. We took part in the movement for innovation, demonstration projects, and so on. If you ask people now in the construction industry, are things different since 1994? They'll say they are almost unimaginably different. The construction industry has revolutionized itself. The health and safety aspects of it, the respect for people, the conditions on site, they are totally different. But the other thing that's very different is that the contractors are in charge. And the contractors are at the center of it. Contractors are the center part of that picture. The construction industry has become more efficient. It's become more efficient through greater control, because what it lacked in 1994 wasn't only the lack of interdisciplinary work, which actually was more widespread than many people sometimes give credit for. It was actually quite natural for architects and engineers in the best practices to collaborate very early on, and with specialist manufacturers. It was a slight myth-making about how bust it was. However, it was disorganized, and there was to be, for example, a story that at the time of the movement of innovation said, imagine a FTSE 100 company looking for a CEO. They would never find a likely candidate in the construction industry. It was kind of seen as, a demonstration of how backward the industry was. Now, actually, people won't recognize that description. There are, the whole managerialism that has now come into the industry, and the techniques, which are largely techniques of control, are very sophisticated, and they are effective in a capitalist neoliberal economy. There's no question. In a market economy, they do deliver certain things. Whether they deliver value in the best way possible is a very different question. But they do deliver that. And all right, it hasn't completely disappeared, that attitude about construction. So when Michael Gove wanted the construction of schools rethought, he got a retailer in rather than Sebastian James, rather than anybody from construction. So the kind of the whiff of backwardness still hangs around the industry, but actually, at its best, the industry, which has always been able to produce individual great works, always, now very regularly produces excellence in terms of quality, time, and cost, certainly in terms of construction. So I think the next 10, 20 years is actually making the left-hand side as effective as the right-hand side has been. That actually we need to think, we can say, all right, it's not collaboration which has really improved the industry, but it's what can now make the difference. Because control has had some unintended consequences as well, and it has also left certain things untouched. Unintended consequences include the kind of dominance of cost over value, the inability to take a long-term view, the inability to truly factor in sustainability. And in many ways, the sustainability project, for reasons that many of us will have many theories about, has also not quite gone the way it has. And all of these are linked. So what I'd say is that just as the Cambridge Programme for Sustainable Leadership, the UK GBC in its report on talking about the business case for sustainability, not on the planet-saving case for sustainability. The work called Finding a True North recently, I can't remember the name of the author, but a fantastic talk at the RSA, all of whom are saying that actually the paradigm has to be, what is the true offer to the consumer, to the person who actually receives the products of what we do, of all these techniques, and can we build that case? Who is it good for? And part of that is that there isn't a single answer. So to be slightly corny and take the question for another walk, it's not so much that we're doing okay in diversity and not so much in interdisciplinarity. We actually need to find more diverse ways of talking about interdisciplinary work and to understand which one fits what and who for. Thank you.